Good afternoon. It's the last half of the last day here at SU in Australia, and I remember vividly, like it was yesterday, the first time I attended Singularity University events. This is my 19th, so I'm sort of a veteran now, but I remember pretty much how I felt after the first day of being sheep-dipped in exponentials. Was that pretty astonishing for you? First day, you're thinking, wow, I haven't been paying enough attention. There's all this stuff going on. My peripheral vision wasn't all it could be. The second day, you pretty much start to feel exhausted. The third day, there's so many things going on you didn't know about. You feel stupid. You want to go back home, climb into bed, pull the covers over your head. That's pretty much where you are now, right? Look, I love Australia. Australia's got a great and noble history about innovation. And one of the things that I think is really cool for us to talk about is what it means to innovate effectively amidst exponential change, and to do so fearlessly. Because one of the useless ways to process everything and to own everything you've been learning about here on the SU stage for the last few days is to be afraid. To be afraid of the future, that never is a great place to innovate from. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about what it means to turbo boost innovation confidently in the presence of these catalysts and accelerants that you've been learning about. And I'm going to do that in a way that I hope will be specifically tuned to this place in the world that I dearly love. I've come many times. I've had the privilege of working with leading companies and governments in the region. I'm well aware of your vaunted innovation history. I could have added another more than 100 innovations that are important in this region. I sneezed onto the screen a handful of the ones that are really notable. And I want you to know that it's an exciting thing to be around people who have such a history of being far enough away from the rest of the world that you've had to be self-reliant and had to innovate when the going gets tough. It's something the entire region should be proud of. I'd also like, however, for you to notice something. In the main, the innovations that you cite to one another that you're proud of, that your government cites as Australia at its best, are mostly about isolated individual technologies. And as you've been learning, the real pattern of abundance, the real pattern of exponential change is connectedness. And what I'm going to give you as a sense of possibilities is that the great skill that as leaders in this room who want to change industries, categories, the nation, the world, the thing to do is to be able to look for the opportunities to reframe and to powerfully restate the kinds of things that will be the basis for focusing and fostering the kind of innovations that will make us all proud. I'm going to break that down for you into a few bite-sized nuggets, but one of the most important things I want to say is that it's sometimes hard for people in this region to feel the discomfort, the burning platform or the need to innovate when you're frankly so successful as a region in driving economic growth and relative levels of prosperity, number 2 in the world. So I want to sort of break this down into just 3 bite-sized nuggets. First is how you innovate in today's connected world in ways that sort of fix the myths that we are so plagued with and substitute the methods that allow us to innovate more boldly. And for those of you taking pictures of the slides, knock yourself out. You're welcome to it. But I've already posted them for you on a secure website, and you're welcome to the slides, okay? So I'm not trying to be coy with this. But I do want to begin by giving us a sense of how strange it is to innovate today. You all know the story of Airbnb. Some of you might not know all of the details, but in just 6 years, 2 great leaders figured out how to orchestrate 2.3 million rooms, homes, apartments, condos in inventory every day, owning exactly 0 of those, right? So you get these 2 guys, Brian and Joe. They started, as so often people do, with the wrong idea. Let's couch surf. They learned to create a platform based on trust. If you have not seen their famous TED Talk where they introduce what they were trying to do, the way they do it is they say, we had to create a world where folks would take something they care about, their home, or if they were a guest, their family, and trust strangers with it. The way they dramatize that in the TED audience, 2,000 people in the room, is they said, take your phone, unlock it, hand it to a stranger near you. How'd that make you feel? And they wanted to get past that queasy feeling to a trusted ecosystem. Now that's cool, but even after they achieved it, what astonishes me is that we're not seeing an explosion of similar ideas that are leveraging assets that people don't own. We are seeing dozens, but not a huge explosion. And that surprises me because one of the skills I'd like to be normal now in Australia and New Zealand is the ability to deconstruct an innovation after it exists and understand how to do it. And I do this all the time, even with my graduate students and with great innovation teams, including some here in Sydney, where I've been talking to great leading innovation teams for the last few days. I ask people, would you know how to do it now? Too often, people of a certain age and people of a certain kind of background just assume that this happens with nerds in remote places, typically California, using mystical things. If you've met any of those tech teams in any part of the world, what you know is that they're just overgrown teenagers. You must have some teenagers installed at a household near you, right? Kind of surly, annoying creatures. You remember them? The one thing that's pretty much characteristic of all of our teenagers everywhere in the world is we raise them on Lego building bricks. That's what they're good at. They're building stuff out of Lego building bricks. So let me show you exactly how Airbnb functions. This is a little analysis I've done for you of their tech stack. There are 20 things that they do in order to sort of drive application and data capabilities, 16 DevOps capabilities, 13 utilities, and 8 business tools. And some of you are saying, well, okay, but I wouldn't know how to do that. Well, every one of those things, almost, is completely available to you. You could install it this afternoon for any business you wanted to start. Now, if there was somebody in the room from Airbnb, they'd say, whoa, no, wait a second, we've got some secret sauce, so let's take that out of the equation. There's one of the 20 application and data capabilities, 2 of the DevOps, 3 of the utilities, and 1 business tool that people at Airbnb would say, oh, we helped to invent those capabilities. Now, a good tech team might take, I'm being generous here, 4, sometimes even 5 hours to find you substitute capabilities that you could rent and install. So if you are saying, I don't know how to do this, must be mystical geniuses that do it, I'm here to tell you that the reason you haven't done it is because nobody's told you. It's just assembling Lego building bricks that you can license and install for free. This is how the modern world is built. It's completely different than anything we've seen before. And that's the way the kinds of innovation that is, for the moment, not as normal here in Australia as it could be and should be, is happening everywhere in the world. I think of this as a simple principle. In the old days, 3 years ago, innovation was very often a function of invention. Now, in the 21st century, where we're installed happily, mostly it's about the elegant integration of well-known things, often very old things. Just put them together in a surprising new way. Be clear-headed about what you're trying to do. You see that in the amplification of the world. The device that you have in front of you or in your pocket or purse nearby has available to it more than 1.5 million apps. Nobody needs that many. We hear about the cool ones from our buddies. We're forced to endure the boring ones that our enterprises shove into our devices. And in any event, after they're installed, they take care of themselves in a surprisingly well-behaved way. Asset-light, distributed, rated, open, porous, the whole nature of modern digital ecosystems. And that's the nature of what we're trying to build everywhere in the world. And when you get it right, it amplifies at an astonishing rate. I'm going through Hong Kong airport recently, took a picture of this enormous billboard. WeChat Pay didn't exist as a platform 2.5 years ago. Today, it's processing 600 million transactions a day. Imagine that, okay? Getting it right means you get amplified. Some of you know I wrote a book about this topic. This is not a sales pitch for the book. This is a rueful admission of stupidity. I spent years on the book, lots of money. I'm in year 4 of the writing. I'm come out of my closet dazed and confused. One of my very, very kind and polite anthropologists walking past me thought she was supposed to say something to the crazy uncle they kept in the corner, and she said, how's that book thing coming? I admitted my problems and thought she was sincere. I said, data in chapter 14 is kind of kicking my ass. And she said, well, okay, but you know, nobody reads books anymore, right? And she keeps walking, and I'm thinking, damn, that's why you use anthropologists. They remind you about how human beings live. So while the book has this ridiculous ambition of codifying what's known now about getting innovation to succeed, the key to it really is a discovery we made 21 years ago. I used two of my brilliant colleagues, Ewan Duncan and Vijay Kumar, and they gathered up, at my suggestion, what turned out to be more than 1,200 historic innovations over a 200-year swath of history. Really old stuff, Model T Ford, Internet, things that were new at the time, now quite old, Cirque du Soleil circuses. And they were so disparate that we assumed they would have nothing in common. Vijay Kumar, brilliant methodologist, sort of put them in computers, condensed them down with pattern recognition and clustering techniques, and comes to us one day and he says, hey guys, you know what we discovered? There are now, and this is the beautiful part, there have always been, unbeknownst to most people, 10 distinct types of innovation. Color at Doblin is never random, never decorative, so the colors actually matter here. The stuff in blue, it's taught in business schools. The stuff in gold is taught in engineering schools, and the stuff in red is taught in either social science schools or in design schools. And the reason innovation is often hard and frequently improbable, especially the boldest kind of innovation, because it's actually hard to get the business people, the engineers, and the happy designers and social scientists to actually be collegial and respectful and to share the challenge of creating something truly new. So modern innovation tradecraft, the whole field of de-risking innovation, making it easy instead of hard, is about trying to break down those normal boundaries and get differently trained, differently abled people to come up with the breakthrough business models, the distinctive capabilities, and these distinctive experiences that drive things that change the world and create growth. It turns out there's nothing terribly mysterious about it, it's just rare. And when you make it obvious for people, it becomes easier. And when you make it routine for people, what you get is a smaller number of bigger ideas, what we think of as bolder concepts, that are easier to implement because you're conscious about what it's going to take, and that are ultimately harder for others to copy because they don't quite see all the sophistication in what you've launched until year 2 or year 3 after it's built considerable momentum. Smaller number of bigger ideas, easier to implement, harder to copy. That's pretty much the holy grail of innovation breakthroughs. And the way we like to sort of talk about it is you've got to get your business leaders to talk about things that are changing humbly. I don't know what we're going to do about this, but I seem to have an instinct that we've got to design. We heard just before lunch about the future of work. We might have to design the world less about risk management and financial services, more about opportunity, perhaps. And if you do that in the right way, you can ask the engineers what's becoming practical now that used to be rare or costly and hard. You can ask the business leaders, how could we turn that into a machine that isn't robust enough that it will throw off free cash flow reliably? And you can ask the designers, how can we make that a rocking great experience that people are in fact grateful for? That's how you guess at what's coming next in a way that's useful. We all also need to ask the question, I think brilliantly understood in our tour of the future of energy systems yesterday, about how we also do this in a way that is sustainable on our small blue planet. And learning to do that, rule of thumb, ladies and gentlemen, fun fact to know and tell, if you're using 5 or more types of innovation when your team tries to innovate, and you're carefully using all 3 colors, that is predictive of a breakthrough. So we have broken down and built up and made transparent rather than, abstract the basic rules of thumb for how to create a breakthrough, and that's just one of the ways innovation gets a little easier. The second big challenge is that people tend not to focus on the right things. In financial services, there's always an orgy of coming up with new products. This is a carcinogen the Surgeon General should get around to regulating. There are 44,000 plus financial services products in the world. Nobody's sitting around anywhere in the world with their head in their hand saying, I need a new one. Okay? We have to focus on things that matter, things that people will be grateful for, in ways that work. Okay? So let's talk about what that means. In shorthand, it's really about platforms. When I was a kid starting this work, this is what platforms consisted of. I know you're trying to recognize those shoes. They were worn by Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road Tour, 1974. Okay, never mind. What's really interesting is that since those silly shoes were worn by that guy on stage, the things that have come along and connected across the world are the ones that really have made a difference. And just to point that out for you in a deep way, these are the world's leading consumer platforms as we sit here today. Just ask a quick question. I can see some of you. Show of hands, how many use at least 3 of those every day? Yeah, pretty much everybody in the audience. It's so great to have such switched-on attendees at SU events. Least valuable of those is worth well over $1 billion US, and they range to well over 40 billion US dollars. When you learn to think in platforms, you're thinking in really serious value amplification. And there are also platforms that connect at the business-to-business side, and these are the biggest ones of those. You can't escape these suckers. They're everywhere. You use every one of them every day. Least valuable is worth a little over 10 billion US dollars, and they range to well over 400 billion US dollars. So don't think about products, think about platforms. Think about the things that will make it easier for people to do hard things and fundamentally get past the technologies into a business model that makes it easy for people to use it, delivering an experience that human beings are genuinely grateful for. We can illustrate that a dozen different ways. I started by taking apart the tech stack of Airbnb, but let's step back, use the wide-angle lens, and say, how are they innovating? Specifically, 5 types of innovation, and there's that genetic code I talked to you about. 5 or more types of innovation, all 3 colors, predicts that the thing you're trying to bring to a breathlessly awaiting global public has the power to change the world, change the category, and do something materially different. Sometimes people do that by focusing on weird stuff, themes that are just changing over time. Just again, so I can calibrate, show of hands quickly, how many of you have never heard of Rich Barton? Thank you for being straight about that. It's a very large percentage of the audience. So this is a guy who's created 3, count them 3, separate unicorns, companies that have achieved more than $1 billion valuation in a row. And every time, he did it by squinting hard at the world and saying, why is it I don't understand this thing? The first thing he did is saying, why don't I understand how much an airplane flight is supposed to cost me? Why is it mysterious? And I have to call, a travel agent to figure it out. So his first billion-dollar baby was Expedia. And he sold it to Microsoft, made himself a closet full of cash. And then the next thing he was curious about, maybe right afterwards he wanted to buy a house, and he asked the question, well, how come I don't know the price of a house? Or for that matter, the price of my house when I sell it? And he decided that was a black box, and it could be a glass box, and he created Zillow. Sold it for $1 billion, and then he said, how come I don't understand which companies are cool and which ones are kind of creepy? And so he created yet another platform called Glassdoor, which has just burst through $1 billion valuation. Notice the pattern here. The guy said lots of things are kind of cloaked in mystery, and I don't see why. And I'm going to open them up. This is a great way that innovation leaders think. And it's not hard, but you don't know the answer on the first day. You say to yourself, the world is like this, but does it need to be? The heart of most great innovation is finding something that irritates you, wastes your time, pisses you off. Okay? And that's incredibly interesting as the basis for creating a breakthrough. Third and final thing I want to talk about. Innovation in this extraordinary part of the world. You are privileged, you are extraordinarily well off, and yet, there are a couple of patterns that are worthy of innovating into. One of the patterns I kind of revealed in a statistic on the second slide, which is that officially, with government statistics, your unemployment rate is a thin, impressive 5.5%. And yet your underemployment rate, the people in this region of the world that don't particularly like the job they have, is closer to 25%. And I think that that's a really interesting thing. We heard from Edie just before lunch about the future of work. One of the ways that the future of work gets compelling for us is if we can learn to make it meaningful. And I want to talk about that in a way that's interesting. Your own government reports also point out two critically important patterns. Ranked by the Global Innovation Index, a reasonably robust methodology used around the world, even here in the Pacific Rim region, Australia is rated 17th, behind several other nearby leaders. We should fix that. Second thing that's interesting is when you look at the digital patterns of innovation, Australia is over there in the pink area, labeled by the analysts stall out, while several of your neighbors are nearby in the bright yellow area, stand out, the ones that are doing a pretty good job of accelerating innovation through digital connectedness. So it is very important that you have been, in fact, sheep-dipped into the world of exponentials. If you're not afraid of it, but rather you're embracing it, if you're getting to the place, which is hard to get to, that says for the first time in human history, if you have an idea, it's easier than ever before to amplify that idea and to attach it to the kinds of things that make it connected, powerful, sophisticated, and delivered, typically through people's cell phones, in ways that they're grateful for, if you've done your homework, okay? So I think it's a case of trying to challenge one another to see this in a new way. When I teach this at the Kellogg Graduate School of Management, a place where years ago, they're very proud of the way they invented marketing systems, I figure I have to jiu-jitsu these spoiled, rotten kids into a different way to think, okay? So I teach them about cornflakes. If you're in the cornflake business, what you think about is your product, a breakfast cereal. But to make your company big and successful, you have to think about your capabilities, the competencies and the processes. So what can you do to corn when you buy, rail car loads of it? Well, you can clean it, polish, mill it, bleach it, fortify it, flavor it, cull it, flake it, puff it, and frost it. For bonus points, you can do that to wheat, too, and then to oats. I mean, it's crazy. And if you do that in a clever way, you're going to get yourself a whole bunch of cereals. And this is the way people would run businesses, right? They would have a meaningful unit of action. We've got to come up with a new breakfast cereal. They'd have a meaningful unit of optimization. This is what our company's good at, our core competencies. Okay? And then you would have a meaningful unit of analysis. We know the share of wallet people spend on our breakfast foods. Life was great. And what's confusing is the way we have to do it in the digitally connected world is surprisingly, bizarrely similar, and yet fundamentally different. It kind of rhymes, but it's weird. So let's take that one apart. The new thinking that people have to be good at goes like this. You think about your unit of action. I took apart, remember, the Airbnb tech stack? What you're seeing here is the actual tech stack of Uber, not one piece of which is proprietary. It would take you most of an afternoon to exactly replicate the tech stack of Uber, okay? So that's what they build. There's a unit of optimization, the way in which they think about what are we going to do. They never have thought of themselves in the taxi business. They've defined themselves as in the urban logistics business, whatever the heck that means. And so they're creating a steady stream of new experiments that help urban living. And they're doing it on both sides. Some things that are beneficial to drivers or service providers, and some things that are beneficial to you and me, the customers. They even have created, in Pittsburgh, a brand new ATG, Advanced Technologies Group, and they routinely hire the entire graduating class of the toughest programming system at Carnegie Mellon University, located in the same city. So that's what they're building to be kind of good at. And then what they're doing lately is saying, well, we've just passed 5 billion rides on 6 continents. 76 countries and 450 cities. So the question they're asking is, well, which of those government leaders, which mayors, which heads of government locally, instead of being annoyed with us, are saying, we want to set the conditions so Uber-like stuff is easier here than ever before. So they're asking the question, where's the least friction anywhere in the world to use as our test labs? And how can we put more energy and resources in the places in the world that amplify, accelerate, simplify, lubricate the way in which they experiment and try cool stuff? Okay? Notice the comparison, though. There still is a unit of action. There still is a unit of optimization. There still is a unit of analysis. So lazy business school professors like me, we can say, well, we taught you that stuff with cornflakes. But you notice how different it is? This is what is not yet comfortable, reasonable, natural, and normal here in Oz, learning to have a bigger ambition, breaking it down into the ways in which you can de-risk that ambition, and systematically changing industries, categories, regions of the world, and the whole world when you get it right. One more pattern I want to sort of tease you with. A little analysis I did for you of the unicorns in the shared economy, the gig economy, if you will. 9 of them came from California, 1 came from Texas, 3 from New York, 1 from the UK, 1 from India, 1 from China, 1 from Australia, and wait for it, 1 from New Zealand, where there are more sheep than people. So look, you guys are batting pretty well in the gig economy. It's really quite impressive, but here's the really interesting thing. I've done enough predictive analytics on this to tell you that if we have this conversation in this same room a year from now, there will be at least 15 or 18 more billion-dollar gig economy players. And the growth of that seems exciting until you realize that for the human beings, life as an Uber driver or life as a person making crafts that you give away or sell on Etsy is vaguely terrifying. The gig economy does not make families comfortable. It's too uncertain, and we have to fix it. And what I think is going to be happening, and that Australia can lead the world in, is number 1, picking up the pace of innovation. Try to not control it so much, set the conditions with clouds, crowds, partners, and prizes to just try more things. Second basic principle is, designing for opportunity, and so that we stop doing quite so much in risk management and start creating meaningful work, meaningful ways for people to live, as we heard from Edie before lunch, and then specifically build really badass new ecosystems, connected in powerful ways that we can come along and change the world. You've heard all about exponential change. Innovation is changing exponentially too. And Australia really can and should be vastly bolder in the kinds of innovations you set forth to create. Stop it with the excuse, our market's too small. The market for good ideas is global, and they're hungry for yours. And if I could give you any special gift today, it's this. It's never been an easier time, once you have a bold idea, to amplify it in advance of a breathlessly awaiting global public. So stop waiting, start in, join the party. It's a really important topic, and it's a really important time to do it. If you want the slides, send an email to support@doblin.com, mention this event, SU Australia, and you'll get the deck. It's a very, very, very big honor of mine to be able to talk to leaders and dynamic teams that are trying to change life in this part of the world and by extension everywhere else too. Great privilege. Thank you very much.